Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to allow people to get logged on here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, it looks like most people have joined. So thank you all for participating in tonight's HOA virtual town hall. My name is Megan Vukasic, and I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning here at the City of Fishers, and looking forward to getting your feedback on a proposed ordinance that we're bringing forward that's going to impact new HOAs being established in the City of Fishers. So just to go over the meeting format tonight, so this is a virtual webinar, and all of the questions that you have can be asked via the Q&A feature. So you should see that at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat feature that if you have any general comments, you can post those in the chat. And then we've got Ross Hillary, who will be fielding those questions and any comments that arise. And this meeting is being recorded, and it'll be posted online at our public website, which is fishers.in.us, and that will be available starting tomorrow. So if you know anyone who wasn't able to make tonight's meeting, it will be recorded and posted online for them to view. So the meeting agenda for tonight, we're going to be going over the proposed ordinance just to give you an idea of why this is being introduced and really what we're requesting to be changed. We also have some survey questions just to get a better understanding of what the existing HOA voting requirements are today and what challenges you all face when it comes to changing governing documents. Then we'll open it up to Q&A if anyone has any questions or any comments for us. And then I did just want to go over existing HOA resources that the City of Fishers offers while I have you all here tonight. So who's on this call for panelists? Like I said, my name is Megan. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of Fishers. We've also got Ross Hillary, who's the Assistant Director, and then Rodney Retzner. He is a partner at Krieg DeVault, and he is also the legal counsel for the Planning and Zoning Department. And so we've also got we have him on the call to help address any of our legal questions tonight. So the proposed ordinance, this is an amendment to our Unified Development Ordinance, which is our zoning ordinance, and it's really to establish maximum voting percentage requirements for amending HOA governing documents. So as the ordinance was introduced, the maximum voting percentage would be a simple majority, which is 50% plus one. That did go to first reading at City Council, and then the next meeting is scheduled for a public hearing before our Plan Commission. So that is how the ordinance reads today. And that would be for any change to an HOA governing documents. I do want to be clear that this only applies to new HOAs. So most of you on the call tonight are probably an HOA representative for an existing neighborhood in Fishers. So this would not apply to you, but we are looking to get feedback from you just to make sure that we're addressing everything that we can be with this new ordinance. And the purpose of this change is really to respond to feedback from HOA representatives who have voiced challenges with amending covenants and restrictions to establish rental restrictions. So that's the why behind this being introduced. Is we've just heard from HOA representatives that it's nearly impossible to get these CC&Rs changed. And so we're just trying to make that easier for neighborhoods to really empower them to set the regulations for their subdivision that they'd like to set. So feedback that we'd like to get from you all tonight is really to understand what the current HOA voting requirements are for your neighborhoods. This is not something that the city of Fishers has kept track of, just because these are private agreements between the homeowners and the HOA. And so would like to get a better understanding of where you all are at today with your voting requirements. And then what are the existing challenges that you face? Are there requirements that should be easier to change? We just want to better understand what those are. So I am going to just pause real quick here. This is just a general overview of our ordinance. But Ross, do we have any questions at this point before I launch the survey questions?
Yeah, you almost covered it, but the question that Rebecca had was, you mentioned that it wasn't going to be retroactive. Can you maybe explain why it's not retroactive to existing HOAs and COAs?
Yeah, and maybe I'll have Rodney answer that one on why this can't apply to existing HOAs.
Yeah, so the reason you cannot do that is the city doesn't have the agreements, CCRs that residents have with their homeowners association are private contractual agreements with those residents and those homeowners associations. The city is not a party to those contracts. So while the city can change the ordinance to say that all future homeowner associations have to have certain terms in those private agreements, the city cannot put new terms into a private agreement to which the city is not a party when people have already completed those contracts. So as a resident sitting there and has a viable contract with their homeowners association and the terms and conditions of what they can do in their neighborhood, the city then can't come back and change the terms of that contract. So we can only affect contracts with an ordinance like this going forward. And the only way we do that is by saying in the Unified Development Ordinance, when you're implementing CCRs and agreements with your homeowners, certain provisions have to be in that agreement, but we can only be doing that going forward.
Rodney, Richard asked another question. Is it correct that the state can set a quorum for existing HOAs?
The state of Indiana already has a law on quorum. That's where all the agreements that have the 75% requirement come from. Everybody bases their agreements on that. Some have said, and I have not done a legal research here, but some have said that if the state legislature comes out with a quorum requirement change, that law will supersede or can supersede all currently existing agreements that HOAs have with their residents. Again, I've not done the research to see if the state legislature can do something like that, whether that's an effect on contractual rights between residents and their homeowners association. All I can tell you all sitting here today is that if the legislature passes such a law, then we'll have to see what the effect of that is going forward. Because as I sit here right now, I don't really know the answer to that question.
Gotcha. That's all we have so far.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we do have some questions that you'll be able to answer live. So I'm going to launch a series of questions. Please go ahead and fill out the responses accordingly, and then I'll share the results as we go through these questions so we can all see them. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll. And can you all see this, Ross and Rodney? Are you seeing this on your screen? Okay.
Yes.
So this is just general information. Wanted to understand who's on the call tonight. So go ahead and select which one best describes you. And then there's also a second question on how you heard about tonight's meeting. I just want to better understand how we're communicating effectively with our HOA representatives. All right, looks like everyone has answered. So I'm going to end the poll and then share the results. So you all should be seeing the results now. So it looks like most of you on the call are HOA representatives that are homeowners. So about 60%. We also have HOA management companies, elected officials, and then some legal counsel. And then how you all heard about the meeting: Fisher's HOA newsletter, city council or plan commission public hearing, word of mouth, and then other. So that is great. I'm glad to see so many homeowners taking the time to participate in tonight's call. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the second question here. Let's see. Okay, so the next couple of questions are going to focus on the voting requirements that exist today in your HOA governing documents. So this first question relates to changing bylaws and day-to-day operations. So this is different than the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that we mentioned earlier. So these would be how your HOA functions as an organization. Want to better understand what your existing percentage requirements are. So we've got either a simple majority, a super majority, which is 75%, 2/3, 66%, other. So there are potentially other voting percentages in these governing documents that aren't listed here. Go ahead and select that one, or you're not sure. Okay, it looks like a majority of people have voted, and I know there's a few on the call that are not HOA representatives, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. So it looks like most of those who answered have the 75% requirement for their bylaws, which, as we mentioned earlier, is the existing percentage maximum under state law. So I'm not surprised to see that. And then a few of you said other. If you are aware of what your voting requirement is and you pick that other, if you would go ahead and put that in the chat, just so we're aware of what that is, that would be great. All right, so this next question is focused on those covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So covenants, conditions, and restrictions, which are referred to as CC&Rs, these are the requirements and limitations of what you can and can't do on your property. So these are the design standards that exist within your governing documents. And so sometimes there's different percentage requirements for changing these than the bylaws or the day-to-day operations. All right, it looks like a majority have entered. their answer for this one as well. And so similar to the last one, most of the voting requirements are that 75%. It looks like a few of you had that 2/3, and then just a few of you had the simple majority.
I think some of those that came up as other on the previous one, like you mentioned, Megan, a couple people in here, Richard, Wade, Tom, stated that their bylaws do not require a vote of the homeowners, only the board, and that the CCNRs do require the homeowners. So there's a couple here that provided that information.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. This next one is focused on participation. So would like to understand what participation methods your HOA currently allows. So what we have as options here are virtual participation of meetings, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. This has become more popular in the last couple of years, like tonight's meeting. Just makes it easier to participate. Electronic voting, mail-in ballots, or allowing for voting windows. So this would be allowing you to vote over multiple weeks, not just at one occurrence. And this is a multiple choice question. So please select all of the participation methods that your HOA allows. All right, looks like there's still a few of you who have not answered. I'm going to give this about 10 more seconds. Okay, so mail-in ballots is the most popular. I think most HOAs do allow that, but it is good to see that there is virtual participation in meetings, and then a few of you allow for electronic voting and then for voting windows. This is good to know, just makes participating more easier for these homeowners and getting these changes made when there are high percentage requirements for changing CCNRs. Okay, and then we have one more question. And this is focused on HOA challenges today. So in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge your HOA currently faces when it comes to voting requirements? We've got a few listed here that we've heard. One would be changing rental restrictions. This has been a big topic of conversation over the last year. We held a similar HOA virtual town hall on this last year, and then held an in-person workshop as well. Conducting regular business, such as obtaining quorum, that's been something we've heard recently, and then changing other covenants, conditions, and restrictions. If there is a challenge that you're facing, specifically as it relates to voting requirements that's not listed here, please go ahead and select that other, and then would love to hear what that challenge is if you want to go ahead and post that in the chat. Okay, it looks like the same number of people who answered the last couple of questions have answered this one. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And then here are the results. So 7 of you said changing rental restrictions was the biggest challenge. Then 4 of you said other, and then 3 said conducting regular business, and 3 said changing other covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Ross, did we have anything come through the chat on that other one for this question?
A couple. Doug says all 3 of the options. Rebecca says the biggest challenge is getting 67% yes vote to amend their 20-year-old declarations and bylaws. And Richard said quorum for board elections is, according to our management company, 60% of the homeowners, which is impossible to meet. And Julie said, I would say all of these are challenges that we face. We are currently voting on rental registrations and lowering the quorum to 51%, and it's a challenge to get those votes. And a couple of questions on participants. We've had between 19 and 20 people in attendance on the call, plus the staff.
Oh, sorry, and I forgot to share those last results. So again, I know I verbally said them, but here are those results. And Ross, what you just said is very similar to the feedback that we've been hearing. Establishing quorum, getting people to participate, that seems to be a big challenge with voting on any of these changes within the governing documents. And so that's really the purpose behind this ordinance, is try to address how we can help at least new HOAs that are being established not have these same issues. All right, so that is it for the survey questions. Thank you all for participating. That's very helpful for us. I'm going to go ahead and move on here to Q&A. I know we've been answering some questions, but Ross, any other questions that have come up or any other comments that are worth addressing? And if you have any questions, please enter them in that Q&A feature.
Yes. One question from earlier or comment, there's a threshold of 50% that would apply to some things and 75 or a larger quorum. Can you maybe explain what would the 50% specifically what that would be allowed for?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we're here to discuss tonight is trying to address those topics that 51%, let's say, that simple majority would apply to. The way the ordinance was proposed would affect any change to the governing documents. But as we've had this conversation with elected officials and with HOA representatives, there's been a question of, should this simple majority only apply to certain elements within those governing documents, such as the bylaws or the regular day-to-day operations, or is the maximum percentage, should that be a blanket percentage for changing anything within those governing documents? So that hasn't been sorted out quite yet.
Okay.
What we've heard from the public today, and Rodney, chime in here as well, because I know you've been a part of these conversations, is that bylaws and day-to-day operations, it seems that most people want those to be a simple majority. Rental restrictions, people would like that to be a simple majority. Other covenants and restrictions, some people want that to stay a 75% because they think that the design standards that were set in place with the initial development should remain. So that could be fence restrictions or shed restrictions. Not everyone thinks that that should be reduced to a simple majority, but that should stay a 75% voting requirement.
Yeah, Megan. And so what I think you're going to find is the ordinance can only hit the bigger picture of what we want to allow by a simple majority. But the city is well aware that there are some things that we should not mandate be allowed to be changed by simple majority, simply because you won't get the participation of the homeowners association, and then a very few people will be making very large changes for a lot of homeowners. And so we're going to be judicious in what we what we think that lower threshold of voting should be allowed to change. And like Megan had described, it's mostly that lower threshold is going to be used for administrative items such as meetings, approving budgets, things of that nature. And the things that the homeowners believe should be a higher threshold, we're gonna defer to the homeowners on that. The one thing that I would caution everyone is to remind everyone that regardless of what you put in these CCRs or your homeowners association paperwork, etc., the neighbors still have to follow what the requirements are of the UDO. So you can't change, you have to follow what's in the city ordinances. You can't change the ordinances by these private agreements among homeowners. So you have to watch out for what you throw in these agreements, even if you do make changes with lower threshold amounts.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. The city of Fishers has minimum design standards that apply to all neighborhoods. And that is what is set in our zoning ordinance. And HOAs can have further restrictions beyond that. And so you would not, as an HOA, be able to change the zoning ordinance. You can only change what your governing documents govern as it relates to your specific subdivision. Ross, any other questions that have come through?
Yeah, just a couple.
And Ross, you're frozen if you can hear us, but we cannot hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'll turn off my video to see if that helps.
Yep,
These
there
were
you
some
are.
general comments. Tom mentioned that for most amendments that are being proposed, most residents are not boards recommending. Rather, homeowners, just the apathy of getting them to participate is somewhat hard. Their neighborhood who was successful the 75% threshold, passed for a rental amendment. But was kind of curious what neighborhoods, when they can't get it 75%, what kind of strategies are they using to get to those homeowners? So I know different neighborhoods can use different strategies on communicating with their residents. So some neighborhoods are successful, but it sounds like a lot of them are struggling.
Yeah, and what I've heard has been successful is some of those participation methods. If your governing documents allow virtual participation, voting by proxy, those are strategies that have helped reach those percentage requirements. Otherwise, it is hard to get people to participate if they are apathetic to the whole process. And I think if you are an HOA that is struggling with getting participation from the homeowners to address a certain topic or a change in your governing documents, certainly reach out to myself in the planning department, and we can talk about your specific neighborhood and what challenges exist and how we can best support you. Although we can't, we aren't really a part of that conversation, we do have a little bit more experience in driving public engagement. And so we at least can help you brainstorm how to get that participation.
Yeah, a couple more comments that came in. One HOA tried to get a simple majority passed, and they conducted a survey of the homeowners. And it was overwhelmingly not something that was supported. So they halted that and are now switching to a 65% fold. They haven't had to vote on that. And to kind of answer this question, what is a neighborhood who was successful and getting their votes that they needed? Julie mentioned that they offered a drive-up voting within a neighborhood park. They went door to door. They sent letters, they did weekly emails, and utilized a Facebook group. So that neighborhood was using multiple ways of communicating to try to get the result that they wanted.
That's great.
That's the Q&A at this point.
All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and I just wanted to make you all aware of resources that do exist on our City of Fishers website. So these resources can be found at fishers.in.us. I'm going to go ahead and click on this link, and hopefully you all can still see my screen here on our public website. So this is the City of Fishers website, as I mentioned, fishers.in.us. Under residents here, we have a homeowners association tab. And so you can find all of our resources under that link. Like tonight's virtual town hall information that was on this page. But one of the best things, if you're not already subscribed to our monthly electronic newsletters, would be to go ahead and subscribe using this button here. Those are monthly updates from our community engagement staff. There's great information, grant opportunities, other just general knowledge that to be aware of throughout the year. And then any HOA town halls similar to tonight, we use those contact information to promote these types of events. And so it's great for us to know who the HOA representative is for your community, so that way we can effectively communicate. So I would just encourage you all to go ahead and subscribe, or if you know someone who is an HOA representative, to point them in this direction to subscribe here. We also have an FAQ that's pretty robust for HOAs. And so a lot of the questions that we've just heard throughout the years are included on this. And so this is a great resource if you do have questions, maybe you're new to your HOA, it might be listed here, but you can always reach out to city staff or the planning and zoning department. We've got our community outreach manager, Samantha, her email and phone number is here as well. And then if you ever have any just general feedback, we've got a feedback button on this page. So this is a great resource to check out. Just wanted to share this with you all. So the ordinance that we discussed tonight, it is going to be going to Plan Commission for a public hearing on April 12th at 6 o'clock. This meeting is going to be held in Launch Fishers, which the address is listed here, 12175 Visionary Way. So if you are interested in participating, please go ahead and attend this meeting. If you're not able to, you can send me comments via email prior to this meeting, and I will pass those along to our Plan Commission members. After the public hearing at Plan Commission, it'll go back to City Council for a final reading and adoption if they choose to approve it. And so that is planned for the April City Council meeting, which I believe, let me get that date. I think it would be the following week. So that would be April 17th, when that would be planned to go back to City Council. That is all we had tonight. Ross, any other questions come through before we wrap this up?
I'm going to get a couple email addresses because we've got some people who had some issues getting the HOA newsletter. So I'm going to work with one resident on that. Julie had another comment though that said, unfortunately, we are on week 6 and they still do not have that 75% threshold. They still have about 18% left. And Tom mentioned that the board should not be shy about asking volunteers to help, quote, get out the vote. So it sounds like some neighborhoods are sort of struggling to get some of those thresholds that they need.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, it's hard for a volunteer board to get that participation. So hopefully some of those recommendations that were mentioned here tonight will be helpful. And as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to city staff too, and we can see how we can best support you. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you all for attending. As I mentioned, we will post this recording online. So if you know anyone who wasn't able to attend, and then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via the contact information that was provided. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.